Hello! Have you already seen the controversial drama Joker, whose viewers foretell several Oscar nominations? This film is one of the loudest commented, and at the same time one of the best among all that came on the screens in 2019. The story of Archer Fleck is truly breathtaking, although he is a fictional character. Unfortunately, there are plenty of such people in real life, unless worse than the Joker. Someone is embarking on a crime because of a lack of money, another because he has had a trauma in childhood, and yet another to gain publicity. Today, we will tell you about the 6 most dangerous criminals in history. Did you think that the story of the Sicilian Mafia was solely a figment of fantasy writers and writers? Well, no. Matteo was born on April 26, 1962 into the family of mafiosos Francesco Messina, and even that is why he was thought to follow the same path. From childhood, the man was inculcated in all the rules of the mafia. Matteo committed the first crime at the age of 18. After this incident, his murderous appetite only increased. The people he sent to that world could fill the entire cemetery. Currently, over 57 murders are attributed to this 57-year-old offender. He became a valued member of the gang in the 90s when he got rid of his father and his wife. It did not stop him that the woman was then in the 3rd month of pregnancy. He was probably also involved in more serious matters several times. For example, he was behind the organization of crimes in some Italian cities in which many people were killed. Messina Denaro has been wanted for over 20 years. In 2002, he was sentenced in absentia to life imprisonment. Though that didn't stop him from climbing to the top, and in 2006, he became the new godfather of Cosa Nostra. To get this title, the man did not hesitate to liquidate law enforcement officers. He is also blamed for putting his hand to the death of people who became the symbols of the fight against the mafia of investigating Judge Giovanni Falcone and his ally, Deputy Prosecutor of Palermo Paolo Borsellino in Italy. Within a few years, policemen managed to capture dozens of Matteo's associates and relatives, but the gang leader is still at large. What's amazing, despite the fact that he is still wanted, he is still managing the largest criminal organization in Europe. There are rumors that Messina has funded a face transplant and is still living in Sicily, managing the finances of the entire province. Is it true? Nobody knows that. This Indian criminal is considered one of the brutal murderers in the world. The FBI has been looking for him since 1993, when it turned out that he was involved in a bombing in Mumbai, which killed 237 people and 713 were injured. American agents demanded that the Pakistani authorities release this criminal. However, their actions failed. According to some intelligence informers, Pakistani officials, instead of handing him out, personally helped him escape abroad. Ibrahim Dawood, who was born in 1955, began his criminal activities in Indian slums. His father was a policeman and did not earn much money. Perhaps this is why Dawood left school early and decided to earn a living on the streets of then Mumbai. Honest work, however, did not bring him coconuts, although he tried his hand at many professions. He was, among others, a mechanic's assistant and a rickshaw driver. Ibrahim earned his first dirty money by lying with fellow residents roaming the noisy flea markets. At that time, men were selling imported watches, exchanging them at any last minute for anything and running away with money. Then they switched to robbing passers-by. Dawood still had leadership qualities in his youth. Very quickly, he made small thieves gangsters and named his band the Company. Initially, his group's activities were limited to minor offenses in a given territory, but over time its range also expanded to other countries. Currently, his gang is not limited to theft. Its members engage in trade in illegal substances or commission murders. How is it possible that Dawood Ibrahim has not yet fallen into the hands of law enforcement officers? To a large extent, the man owes this to the left documents he received in various countries around the world. Although he is currently offered $25 million in his head, the villain is still at large. Félicien Kabuga is wanted by an international arrest warrant for genocide. This man is considered the richest man in Rwanda and the culprit for the most terrible crimes in this country, namely mass murders on representatives of the Tutsi people. During the Civil War in 1994, According to various estimates, 500,000 to 1 million people were murdered in Rwanda. This is up to 20% of the entire population. The history of the conflict between the two feuding nations of Hutu and Tutsi dates back to the distant past, but in the last 25 years their conflict has reached its apogee. It all began with the death of the dictator of Rwanda in 1973-1994 Juvenal Habyarimana, who died in a plane crash. Kabuga, who was then an influential businessman on the radio program, accused the Tutsi nation of the death of the head of state and called for their extermination. It was his statement and the financing of crimes that led to bloodshed on an unprecedented scale. Although Kabuga probably never killed any person himself, an international tribunal recognized him as the organizer of mass killings and demanded his release for a fair trial. The authorities of Rwanda, however, did not dare arrest such an influential man. So Kabuga took advantage of the prevailing turmoil and went abroad. He is now 85 and is probably hiding in Switzerland. For his head, the FBI offers $5 million. This is another serial killer who in 2010 was sentenced to death in the USA. Alcala did not seem to be mentally disturbed. He was a man with a charisma thanks to which he easily gained the trust of his future victims. According to various data, he murdered up to 130 people, only young girls and boys. Their would-be photographer deceived them in his studio and then mistreated them, brutally murdered and photographed. It took 30 years to catch Alcala and prove him guilty. It lasted so long because the investigation for a long time failed to find sufficient evidence against the man. The breakthrough in the case came only at the beginning of the current century, thanks to technologies and the possibility of DNA testing. Rodney Alcala was sentenced to death by shaking the poison. However, in 2013 the death penalty was changed to life imprisonment due to changes in criminal law in New York State. This is another brutal serial killer that the whole world heard about because of his cruelty. In 1978, when he killed the first man, Chikatilo led a quite ordinary way of life. He finished school, served in the army, got married, and had children. The man later admitted that he killed his first victim, a 9-year-old girl, by accident. However, he could not refrain from committing further crimes. For his first crime, another criminal, Alexander Kravchenko, was convicted and executed. Until 1999, the executioner killed more than 50 people, some of them were underage. The villain lured his victims to the forest where he later murdered them. After a long investigation, Chikatilo was arrested on November 20, 1999. Due to the fact that he confessed to all the crimes he had committed, the court sentenced him to death. The murderer tried to pardon the then Russian President Boris Yeltsin. However, his request was rejected. On December 14, 1994, he was executed in a prison in Novocherkassk. The story of this madman was once louder than the famous Joker movie. The story of John Wayne Gacy became the prototype for another famous character, the terrifying Pennywise from Stephen King's novel, 2. The American press gave John the nickname Clown Murderer because this inconspicuous fat man, an exemplary citizen and a social activist, appeared at children's parties as a clown. In his free time, he saw the victim on the streets of the city, lured her to his home, raped and brutally murdered her. 33 young boys died at his hands. What can push a man to do such cruel acts? Childhood trauma. John's father was an alcoholic and constantly beat his wife. The boy's parents were so busy with themselves and their problems that they did not notice that his father's friend molested him. During a trial in February 1989, John Wayne's lawyers tried to prove that their client was mentally ill and could not be responsible for his actions. In addition, they tried to convince the court that John had a difficult childhood and that his father hated homosexuals affected his client's psyche. Despite these arguments, the court sentenced the murderer to death on 13 March. The convicted person appealed against the court's judgment 4 times, thus trying to delay its execution. The man even wrote a book in which he claimed that God had restored his heterosexual orientation. Despite all attempts made, the sentence was carried out. That's all for this episode. Which of these criminals are you afraid of the most? Which story caused you shivers? Write in the comments if you liked it. You can like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon to not miss interesting materials.